Okay. All right. What's up, everybody? How we doing? What do we got? It's Friday, January 31st, final day of January, first month of 2025. I don't know about you guys. I feel like this kind of feels like this month went really slow in like a good way. I mean, just like there was a lot that happened in January, but it just feels like it was a slow month, which I feel like I'm usually saying that it was a really, really fast month, but it feels like it was a slow month. But anyways, here we are, the last day, January 31st, the last day of January 2025. Welcome to today's YouTube Live. If you guys are tuning in, if you're watching this live, say hello in the chat section. Let me know who's tuning in, who's watching this, who's here, who's feasting on this, who's absorbing this, who's a part of this. Let me know. Say hello in the chat section. I would love to hear from you. I'd love to hear who's here and who's tuning in. If you guys have any questions or anything you would like to ask me, anything alive in your space, feel free to post it in the chat section too. Any questions, even like if there's a word that's really, really alive in your space right now, if there's a word that's really, really alive in your space right now, feel free to post that in the comment section. And just everyone who is here, who is watching this, who's watching the recording of this. If you guys haven't already, please do subscribe to my channel. Again, just so you can be notified when I'm going live, when I'm dropping new content. I have a couple new videos that have dropped as of recent, which you should be able to access. I think some of my most recent content will come up in this video. Like at some point it will flash on the top right or on the video. But also if you were to scroll down on this live that you're watching and just ahead of the content just ahead of the comment section, there should be some of my most recent videos. Again, this year, if you follow me on Instagram, I'm going to be essentially reuniting with my filmmaker, screenwriter, performer side of myself, which I used to do a fuck ton of, and I'm going to be getting a lot more into that. So I dropped my first comedy sketch in years about men with mother wounds, which if you scroll down, you'll be able to watch that, and also a cinematic video, which is based off one of these lives, because I'm going to be repurposing a lot of these lives into different sort of cinematic videos. So anyways, just if you guys want to see some of my more recent content, you can just scroll down. It should be accessed there. And if you haven't already, subscribe to my channel so that you just get notified whenever I have new content dropping, and you can be notified when I'm going live, just such as this. So okay, so today I was going to talk about trauma, karma, relationship, which is a pretty wide breadth, right? And so we got Robin W here who commented, and Robin and I had some conversations after the last live, but she posted karmic relationship hooks. Okay, which is obviously very, very, she was the one who kind of inspired a little bit of today's topic, where we're going to talk about trauma, karma, and relationships, because the relational aspect of what's going on energetically, you've seen me talk a lot on Instagram, tracking spirit, tracking God, what's happening 2024, 2025, then eventually 2026, and healing different karmic contracts relationally has been a really, really massive thing that's been going on. So we're going to talk about karma and trauma and romantic relationships, because obviously if you're clued into this channel, if you follow my stuff, relationally, just like anyone, what you're looking to call in and what you're looking to cultivate is a sacred union, right? You're wanting to create a relationship that essentially is a union and a container where everything is able to happen. Like if we think of like a sacred union is a container where there's literally like no part of ourself that we have to minimize, that we have to dilute, that we have to settle. It's the relationship where every single part of the complexity of who we are is able to come to the table. You know, a relationship where there's huge polarity, a relationship where there's magnetism, where there's passion, a relationship where there's humor and there's physical attraction, there's emotional safety, you know, amazing, incredible intimacy. So we think of sacred union as a relationship. The energy feels so pure, it feels so clean, it feels so holy, right? The energy almost feels like this religious experience where it's the culmination and the cultivation of everything that we've sort of done to prepare, the spiritual initiation that we've had to go through, the rite of passage that we've had to walk through in order to become the embodiment of spirit, to step into our power, to step into our soul gifts. So if we're here, what we want is we want a sacred union, right? But obviously, on that path, we have to tend to and clear a lot of karma, right? And I think I'll just start with this, you guys who are tuning in. If we are someone who has a lot of karma that we have to work out in this lifetime, right? So if you're someone that has a lot of karma, and maybe as you sort of think about your past or sort of the path that it's taken for you to travel to get where you are now, maybe just the path and journey that you've been on. And if you probably follow my stuff, then you'll probably resonate and relate to this. But if you're someone that has to work out a lot of karma, you're probably going to have to work out a lot of karma relationally, right? So if you're someone that has a lot of soul lessons to learn, then you're probably someone who's going to have to move through a lot of relational lessons, because obviously we can go on our path and we can heal and we can transform, but relationships really are the most karmic sort of container outside of the core family system that brings up all of our stuff. It brings up all of our shadow. It brings up all of our childhood wounds, all of our trauma. So we need relationships. So if you're someone who feels like you've had so many fucking soul lessons to learn, then very likely you have and potentially will have and currently are working through so much relational karma. And so I think the second thing that I'll say based off of that is, so what's the difference between trauma and karma, right? So you obviously, spiritual teachers, spiritual people talk a lot about karma, 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 karma. And we talk about it a lot, but like what the fuck does that actually mean? So this is my interpretation. Again, other teachers might have different interpretations. And I think I said this to Robin in some of our private messaging. Trauma is the origin, right? It's like the initial wound. It's the break in connection, right? And typically with our trauma, what happens is we have a core trauma that happened to us that usually has some type of byproduct in sort of the quantum realm or the ancestral field. So typically our generational trauma really sort of bleeds into our own personal trauma. Well, it's not always. There usually is bridges between sort of ancestral origin trauma and our own trauma. So trauma is what happened to us. Trauma is the pain. Trauma is the wound. The best way you can think of trauma is just a break in connection, right? A break in the safety of connection, in the safety of intimacy. And when you look at trauma as like a break in connection, we're like, holy fuck, I must have so much trauma, right? Because obviously it's not just the big T trauma, but trauma is just all these little ripples and these inflection points of breaks in connection. So the way that I look at karma is kind of the story of how that trauma plays out. So karma is sort of the story of how that trauma plays out. So when we think about, okay, we have karma, right? We can relate it to our own personal trauma, what us as an individual, what we went through, the breaks in connection that we experienced socially, with mom and dad, with the family system, whatever it might be, different sort of birth traumas. So trauma is what happens to us. And so karma is how that plays out from our own trauma, as well as ancestral origin trauma. And so karma is how trauma plays out. It's the unfolding and the story of that trauma. And I think the really important thing to note with karma is this, right? So based off your particular story, you are going to have incredible strengths and you're really, really going to have a really, really deep shadow, right? You're going to have incredible strengths and you're also going to have a really, really big shadow. So typically what happens in our childhood is from the particular way that we were raised, from the particular way that we were nurtured, we have these core gifts that were specific to the way that we were raised, right? For example, like say we grew up in a space where um, mom and or dad wasn't really present, right? Mom and or dad wasn't really present. And so we had to learn to take care of a little brother, right? We had to learn to take care of a little brother. So in a case like that, for example, let's say that the core gift that that particular story created for us is that we have this incredible capacity to be a caretaker, to be self-reliant, to take care of other people, to be strong. So we have this core gift that was predicated off of the fact that our parents weren't around all the time, or one parent wasn't around all the time. And then probably some likely of that shadow is going to be that we don't physically feel safe in our body, um, and we don't have the capacity to receive. We're not able to receive love because it doesn't feel safe, right? Because we had to kind of bring these walls and these guards up, and we have sort of this imprint and this dynamic that love is inconsistent, that love is not safe, that intimacy is inconsistent, that intimacy is not safe. And so that becomes a part of the shadow, right? And so the gifts and the shadow intertwined is basically how that karma plays out. But also, as we take into account with karma, we have ancestral trauma and we have past life stuff. So all of our stuff, ancestral stuff, and past life stuff, infused with the trauma that we experienced and the trauma that our ancestors experience, creates different karmic cycles. And so karma just means a lot of energy. Karma means a lot of energy. I also see karma as opportunity, right? So when there's a lot of karma, it doesn't always mean negative. Karma could mean, okay, there's real positive energy here. Like stepping into this, there's a real possibility for ascension. So the way to look at karma is this, there's a lot of energy and it predicates off of our trauma, past life energy, and our ancestors' trauma, right? So all these things infused creates this story of karma. So karma is the unfolding, but it means incredible fucking opportunity. It means incredible possibility. And so karma is basically this place where there's all this energy that's in holding, right? So we want to think of, and I think I use the example of karma would be like all this wild, divine fucking energy that is stuck in a box. All this wild, divine energy that has shackles on it. So there's so much opportunity. There's so much opportunity for something to be unlocked, but something is stuck. Something is stuck. So typically, the way, and again, I said karma can be energy amplification, or it could be really negative and dark and entities and shadow. And typically, the connotation, typically, the way that the word karma is used in most spaces has a negative connotation. That karma is stuckness, it's shadow, it's trauma bonding. We could also look at it that it's recreating. You know, a good way to look at karma oftentimes is recreating. We're either doing one of two things. We're either creating or we're recreating. Typically, if we see ourselves, we're in the divine, we're flowing, I'm in the embodiment of God, we're in divine energy. We are creating. We're moving into something that is unprecedented. We're moving into foreign territory. Then if we're not creating, typically we're recreating. Means we're repeating a pattern, we're caught in a cycle, we're relating through shadow, we're relating through our trauma. And so we can think of it like all this energy is stuck. The way that I often use karma is I always talk about karma as divine energy that is stuck in stagnation. So all that to say that if you're going through a lot of karma, if there's a lot of karmic relational stuff that is coming, and Robin, I'm going to get to you here in a sec. If we're going through a lot of karma relationally, and we notice something really big that's coming up, we want to see this as an incredible opportunity for creation. If all this karma is coming up, we want to see it as an incredible opportunity for creation, right? And so typically right before that we break a karmic pattern, or a karmic contract, things get really, really gnarly. Things get really, really uncomfortable. We could almost see it as like every single aspect of the shadow comes up. Every single aspect of the shadow comes up. And typically what a karmic cycle relationally does, typically what a karmic cycle relationally does is it brings up everything that is dormant. It brings up everything that is holding in the darkness. It brings up every single thing that is happening unconsciously. So the way that I view it is if we have a karmic cycle, it's basically God or spirit saying, you need to look at this. You need to get curious about this. You need to tend to this. You need to be aware of this. And so if we're seeing something, it means that we're actually ready to heal something. And so typically what happens is right when we're about to break a really, really big karmic pattern, it becomes so uncomfortably aware to us. It becomes so like it's something that we can't deny anymore. You know what I mean? It's almost like the pattern all of a sudden is so exposed and in the wide open that the charge is trying to be diffused, right? So what happens is when we break this karmic pattern, the charge that's tied to certain things, it just starts to evaporate. It just starts to evaporate, right? So if there's a lot of karma that's coming up for you, it means there's something really, really big that is trying to move. It means the divine is trying to break through. Here's another thing, you guys. If we have a lot of karma, so if we kind of look on our life or look at our relationships, we're like, holy fuck, I've moved through so much karma, or I've had so much karma come to the table, or so much shadow that's come to the table. And it kind of like blasts us wide open. I can't believe I've had this much come up. It means there's an equal proportion to liberation, ascension, and divine on the other side. So, some people who like you look at sort of their story relationally, and it's kind of been, they haven't had a lot of hard lessons. They haven't had a lot of suffering. It's just kind of like figure it out pretty quickly. And so what that means is that the proportional ascension for them in terms of the divine will be equal to the amount of karma they've had revealed, right? So typically really, really old souls have a lot of karma that we have to work through. If we're an old soul and for whatever reason, this iteration, this lifetime, we're meant to come into the divine, we're meant to come into our power, then we're going to have to work through a proportional amount of karma in order to have our soul be liberated. In order, I think of karma as like pressure washing God. Like imagine this, you guys. Imagine like a driveway, right? And you take a pressure washer and you get all the dirt, you get all the guck out, and what you're left with is God. What you're left with is the divine. And so all the karma is all sort of the stuck energy. It's everything that doesn't allow you to move into a space of creation, right? So when we think of karmic relationships, what we think of is all the stuck energy that is not allowing you to move into a space of creation relationally, right? Like I said, you're either recreating or you're creating. You're either recreating or you're creating. And so when you're in a karmic contract, it's kind of like this thing of like, here we go again. There's something that is repeating. And again, it might be something that is not even pertaining to your lifetime, but something in the ancestral realm. Something is repeating. Something is repeating. And it's necessary because it's trying to bring it into consciousness, right? And so if we have a lot of karma that we have to move through relationally, it means we're going to have to go through a lot of process, a big process of having all the dirt revealed. All the shadow from our lifetime, past life, the ancestors' lifetime, our deep ancestors, everything, it's going to have to be revealed and shown to us. And shown to us so that it becomes so evidently clear that now it can shift from being unconscious to now being conscious, and we can actually shift it. We can actually shift it. And so if we're someone who's had so much of this come up, it means there's a proportional depth of ascension that is coming in this. There's an incredible opportunity that is here right now, but you need to understand what's happening. You need to understand what it's about. And so oftentimes, in order to heal karma means, I mean, this is very straightforward, but doing something that you've never done before, showing up for yourself in a way that you've never shown up for yourself before. Really, you have to break bread into newfound territory, right? And karma also pertains to vibration, right? So if we want to think of why are we having karmic sort of unions and tethers into our space, it's because there's a certain vibration that's coming from us that is creating this karma. And when we truly move into the divine, which means we're actually moving to a space of true creation, our vibration just sort of lets go of these cords and tethers. The vibration that we move into, we break new bread into territory within ourselves of what we're creating vibrationally and energetically, that these cords and tethers, they just sort of fall away. They don't really have any power anymore. So, Robin, are you on the call? Robin, you can just say yes in the chat section if you're in the call. Robin W., if you are here, just say yes in the chat section because I'm going to talk to you about what's going on. If not, I will keep going. Maybe she's not here. Okay, Robin W. So we're just gonna have a little chat here. I think it'd be good just to, because you kind of have some stuff that's coming up, and you can just type this in the chat section. But okay, Robin. So you have these karmic relationships coming up. You have these cords and tethers, and I'm just curious, what's the experience? So like you feel these cords and tethers. I guess my first question to you is feeling these core, you said hooks, the word you used was hooks. So does feeling these hooks into you, does it feel different than it did in the past? Like, does feeling these hooks, like, are you more aware of these hooks that are into you than maybe you were in the past? Or does it feel like the same as you felt in the past? So what's your relationship like to these hooks? So you're feeling these hooks that are coming into your space. So does your relationship to them? Yes. And I feel and I can see my own hooks in response. So, okay. So Robin W. is talking about she's got some karmic relational contract stuff coming up and she can feel these hooks, but she's seeing the hooks into her and the hooks that are moving from her into that space more clearly, right? So, as I talked about, when something karmic is ready to heal and shift, we see the karma with new lenses, right? It's almost like we become sober to the pattern. We become sober to the pattern and we start to see it in a different way. So first off, as I mentioned, that means something is ready to shift. It means that something is ready to heal. So as Robin talked about, so what happens is now we have this conditional, complicit sort of exchange happening with someone. Basically, what it means is external boundaries. We're allowing someone, or again, it might just be energy, right? Because someone might be coming into our space not even consciously. It might be happening in sort of the psychic space, but we're allowing someone to come here and we're going like this. So what we would say was allowing someone to come into our space, that's external boundaries. Us invading or moving into someone else's space is internal boundaries. Our internal boundaries are the ways that our ego gets involved in conditional exchanges of love, right? It's the way that our ego gets involved in conditional exchanges of love, meaning approval, validation, some sense of safety and security. We're trying to hold an identity into place. And so, Robin, my next question is, what's the secondary gain? What do you get from you overstepping your own internal boundaries and hooking in. What do you get from that? You can just obviously just post all your responses in the chat section. What do you get from you overstepping your own internal boundaries and hooking in? Because obviously, if someone's hooking into us, you guys, and this is really big with karmic relationships, it doesn't feel clean. It doesn't feel clean, right? There's some type of hooks that are happening through the ego or through the unconscious space. Like, the experience when you're, if there's any women who are watching this, which is probably all women who are watching this, maybe there's one guy, but kind of the experience where, and I know most women on here have experienced it, where some guy, there's who he is at the surface and there's something happening consciously, but then he hooks into you unconsciously, and he probably doesn't even know that he's doing it. He probably doesn't even know that he's doing it. And you're like, like it just, like I can feel his energy and his spirit. And again, what's happening is there's like survival aspects that are hooking in, right? There's survival aspects that are hooking in. So, and this is what happens like with men who are really severed and they're really split and they're really, really compartmentalized. They're not really congruent in their total alignment. And so he might have things he's saying on the surface, but then in the unconscious space, he's hooking into you, right? And why are we hooking into someone? We're trying to survive. We're trying to survive. So Robin, what's the secondary gain that you get from hooking in? What do you get? What does your ego get? What do you get? What does your ego get from hooking in? Because there's always a conditional exchange that happens with hooks, right? And you guys, if we want to think about like this is a really good way to look at it. Why are we involved in relationships that have hooks in them? So when we allow hooks to happen, very simply put, and this is really straightforward, but I think it needs to be said, is that we are essentially blocking and getting in the way of fully inhabiting the full potential and totality of ourself. So when it comes to a karmic relationship means you're split. A karmic relationship means you are split. It means you are divided from yourself. It means you're incongruent with spirit. A karmic relationship means that you're incongruent with spirit. And so imagine the use of a hook in a karmic relationship is you hook into someone so the energy doesn't have to drop. So we think about it like that. The energy doesn't have to drop. Because when that hook leaves, when we take our hooks back, when we don't allow them to hook into us, and again, you guys, if we're allowing someone to hook into us, we're also hooking into them. If we're allowing someone to hook into us, we're also hooking into them. And so here is the piece. It's about total responsibility and accountability about the ways in which we're allowing other people to hook into us. Because if we are allowing other people to hook into us, we're also hooking into them. And what we're doing is we're living in a fragmented, severed, and split version of ourself and our power. We are living in a severed, split, and compartmentalized relationship with spirit. So when these tethers, these tides, when these cords, when they evaporate, when they leave, when they come back into wherever they're supposed to go, now you drop into the full totality of who you are. Now you have to claim your potential. And so these hooks are ways that we dilute and we distract, right? We're trying to survive, but we're trying to survive through very familiar and recreation patterns that continue to keep us comfortable until they're not and severed from our power. And so when we stop co-creating and coexisting in a karmic relationship, we can't avoid what we see. Means when those cords and those hooks leave and eradicate, you can't not see yourself and your totality. It's right there. You see yourself. There's no distraction. And now you have this sort of clear shot, this clear shot to you in the full totality and volume of spirit inside of yourself, right? So karma is existing because there is some aspect of the divinity within you that you're not embodying. There's some aspect of the divinity inside of you that you're not embodying. So Robin W. responds, I get maybe a chance of some fantasy version. I am giving my energy away, dumping it into fantasy instead of using it for creation. It's like an addiction cycle. This hook comes from my diaphragm, right in the center of my chest. That's where the stagnation is. Okay, so what Robin is talking about is that she's giving away her power and existing in some cycle of recreation, right? Of stagnation. If we want to look at recreation, it's just stagnation. We're stuck, right? Something is unable to move, right? And we can usually pinpoint to where this is happening somatically. And so Robin says this hook comes from my diaphragm, right in the center of my chest. That's where the stagnation is. Okay, so as we talk about, we hold on to these hooks so we don't have to fully move into creation, so that we can live in some aspect of recreation. So Robin, I'm curious, if this holding in the center of your diaphragm and your chest, and it sounds like it's kind of just that whole area, I'm curious, if you were to totally release what's holding there, what would you feel like in your body? If you were to completely release what's holding in your chest and your diaphragm, so we're kind of thinking all this area, right? Thinking all this area. And so much of you guys, the solar plexus is our will to create who we are, our will to persevere and execute on who we are, right? So when we're holding a lot in the diaphragm and we're holding a lot in the solar plexus, for example, what that really means is that we're stuck from stepping into who we really are. When we're really holding in like our upper abdomen, it means we're really stuck from moving into the totality of who we are. We're having a difficulty executing on the will of our potential. That's all right here. And then we hold in the chest as well. So Robin, what would happen if what you're holding here would totally release? If you weren't to feel these hooks that you feel in your diaphragm and your chest, how would you feel in your body and what would that create for you? If you were to release what's holding here, what would that create for you? How would you feel? What would be alive in your space? And so you guys, if we think of like karmic relationships too, because Robin's like here, it's like an addiction cycle. The best way to look at it is like, so if you look at your life, right, when you're caught in like addicted patterns, right, a lot of it has to do with like dopamine and your dopamine receptors. And you're caught in what I would call like a potato chip habit. And this is why like people don't really ever change their life. You look at their life like 10 years later and they're still sort of in the same place. And this is like most people, right? And it basically means that like we don't sit in our life and what needs to happen for things to alchemize. You know what I mean? We sit in quick pleasure, things that make us feel good really quickly. We can't sit in boredom. We can't sit in the unworthiness. We can't sit with our emotions. And so nothing really changes in our life. So a karmic relationship is the same thing relationally. It means that we're searching for sort of the relational junk food, which is like instantaneous. It's quick, right? So think about most people out there in the world. We go through a relationship. We're in that relationship for 2 years. There's a death in that relationship. Think about how many people like 2 months later are on a dating app or are dating like 2 months later, right? And we haven't really healed or grieved or fully gone through the death cycle of that relationship. And so Now what happens is when that's the case, we're probably just going to open ourselves up to the similar types of karma, the similar types of relationships. And so typically what happens with most people and people in relationships and dating, like we're really urgent. We have a lot of scarcity, like it's the one thing everyone wants, right? Relationships, everyone wants to fall in love, everyone wants a partner. And when we're not, anxiety creeps in, fear creeps in. And so we have to deal with all of those, that sense of urgency, that sense of scarcity that drives us to continuing to create the same type of relationship. So if you're caught in karmic relational cycles, you are caught in relational junk food rather than moving into, like, what would happen if you were to create your relational feast? And typically what it means is that there would be something you would have to step into internally with yourself in your own power. There's aspects you would have to move into totally inside of yourself in order to call in that relational feast. But most people, the vast majority of the population, we start to rub up to the material that is necessary for us to move through in order to shift something relationally. And we look for the quick pleasure. We look for the instant hit. We get back on the dating app when we start to get uncomfortable. We get involved in these sort of ambiguous sort of connections, right? We just continue to search for this relationship. And so rather than alchemizing what needs to alchemize internally inside of ourselves and working with our frequency and vibration, we just call in the same types of relationships. And so relationally, we're stuck. Relationally, we're stuck in stagnation. And if relationally we're stuck in stagnation, it means that something inside of us is stuck. Something inside of us hasn't shifted, right? So the question I asked Robin W. was, she's holding in the chest and the diaphragm. She's feeling hooks in her chest and her diaphragm. And the question I asked her is, what would happen? How would you feel if you didn't have these hooks holding? If you didn't have this stuckness in the chest and the diaphragm, what would happen? What would you step into? So she says, Eros, I'm feeling it now. Whenever I have an opening and a release with this spot, I feel turn on. My life changes when the energy drops down. I can't tolerate being with things that aren't in alignment. It's like a narrowing of options. I'm less able to tolerate dissonance. More has to die. Okay, so now, Robin, my next question to you, and this is really, really important. So this is interesting that this is coming up. And this is really important, you guys, with a karmic relationship. And so you guys, when it comes to karmic relationships, at what point in feeling good do you have to neutralize feeling good? At what point when you feel in your power do you begin to sabotage? At what point, and also a clue or a cue into unpacking this is, at what point of feeling really good in your body, of feeling creative inspiration, of feeling pleasure, of feeling joy, do you feel your body shut down? And our body's going to reach a point where it does shut down, which is normal. And our growth is going to be, how do we expand the threshold for feeling good in our body, for feeling pleasure, for feeling joy, for feeling ecstasy, whatever it might be. So, Robin, what's that point with how you feel internally in your body when you feel yourself beginning to neutralize feeling good? At what point do you move into pleasure and ecstasy in your body and joy and power, and then you reach a point you're like, ooh, I gotta dim this, I gotta dilute this? And typically, right, as human beings, we have all sorts of different, very convenient ways that we neutralize. It might be with a substance, it might not be. It might be you guys, you must have heard about upper limits. Upper limits are when we reach the threshold of our capacity, and then we have this unconscious way of sabotaging, like maybe we get injured, or maybe we do something that's out of character and make a mistake, and now we're fueled with shame and guilt. And that's like an upper limit. When we reach a threshold, and whatever we do is our system is trying to survive, and so it feels unsafe, and so it sabotages, right? So Robin says, yep, when I get the sacral activation, when the energy drops down, the turn on, I have to blow the energy in an argument or getting mad. I spill it. Okay. So now we're getting to it. Even just Robin responding here, we're getting to what this is about. And it's about two things. And Robin, you can let me know if this is accurate. So the two things would be is one, learning to hold her energetic power, right? So Robin says in the comments that in a way, the energy gets the better of her, right? The energy comes, we get into an argument. So it's kind of like can't hold the energy, can't ground the energy, right? So rather than commanding the energy commands us. The energy sort of controls us. So it's really about being able to ground and hold the energy. It also sounds like Robin gets to a point of feeling good in her body and has a very common pattern of neutralizing it. Robin, is that true? So holding energy, holding power, and an upper limit on feeling good. An upper limit, a way that we neutralize it. Okay. So, and Robin also said that more has to die, right? And so there is something to be said, you guys. And this is like, for example, when I work with a client and say a client's in like a really, really karmic relationship, what I'm taking into account is is being a seer, what's the highest truth, but I'm also taking into account where the client is in their journey, what they're able to hold. And I understand, and this is true with sometimes when people are in karma, Robin, I'm not relating this to you, but I'm just using this as an example, that we need to work out karma in our own time, right? Karma is not something where you can be like, because someone can be in a dynamic they know is not the right thing, but they still have to go through a necessary process in order to get to the point where it actually feels safe enough for them to leave or to shift the pattern, right? And so with karma, we have to work out karma in our own time, right? And so there is something really, really to be said with that. So Robin says that something has to die. So she understands that there's sort of a death process that is happening. And I'm curious, Robin, you say more has to die. Do you have an idea of what has to die? Are you aware of what has to die? Or are you not aware? You just know that more has to die. So when you say more has to die, do you have any consciousness over what needs to die? Do you have any consciousness over what needs to die? She said that more has to die. I need to surrender to the potential death of the relationship. Okay, so I need to surrender to the potential death of the relationship. So I'm curious, when you feel into the death of that relationship, what do you notice? When you feel into that, does it feel just overwhelmingly too big? What happens when you feel into the death of that relationship? So when you begin to feel into that, does it feel available to you? Does it feel really far away? Does it feel overwhelming? What do you notice when you begin to feel into the death of that relationship? Open space on the other side. I can't survive. There is always the fear. Okay. So, Robin, so when you feel into the death of the relationship, it feels like there's a lot of open space, right? And so, open space is the unknown, right? And so, it's not actually the unknown is not what we fear, it's just our relationship to the unknown, right? So, typically, when we fear the unknown, is that was really, really not a safe place when we were younger, right? So it's always our connotation about the unknown, right? So when we have a really negative connotation to the unknown, we see the unknown as a really, really dark place. We see it as a place where we're lost, we're alone, we're confused. But when we heal that relationship with the unknown, we see it as this very big, abundant space of possibility, right? So it's not the unknown that we fear, but it's our relationship to it. Because when we build a healthy relationship to the unknown, all of a sudden this place becomes this place of possibility of what we can create, whatever we want. And so if you think about this, you guys, karmic relationships is a lack of space. There's a lack of space. You're recreating. It's pressure, pressure, pressure. When you're creating something that has never existed before, there's going to be a lot of space. There's going to be a lot of space. Robin, do you get that? Like when you create what you want, there's going to feel like there's a lot of space. That essentially, if you want to move into a space relationally, to create something that has never existed before, you need to actually, the prerequisite and the precursors, you need to feel a lot of open space. Robin, do you get that? That to cultivate and to create a new dynamic or create a new relationship that has never existed before, the precursor and the prerequisite is feeling a lot of open space. You need to be able to feel that open space, because the open space is the divine. The open space is the divine. The open space is God. A lack of space is karma. A lack of space is karma. And so what we're doing is we're holding on to all these pieces as a way to survive, because the unknown, that open space, it feels scary, it feels unsafe. But that is the soul's liberation. Open space is where sacred union comes. It is where the divine comes. When you move, and what that means is you're creating something for. You're in brand new territory, like full death to birth, full death to rebirth. So Robin W. says, yes, I feel the power in that wide open space when I'm in extension and expansion. And so, Robin, I'm curious, what happened when you were younger, when you totally felt in your power? What happened when you were younger, when you totally felt in your power? When you felt in this space of feeling totally liberated in your soul's expression, and you felt in total joy in that space, and you were firing on all cylinders. Maybe you haven't ever experienced that before, but what happened when you felt in your power? Was that a place that was fostered, or was that a place that was shut down, that it was controlled? What happened when you were in your power? Okay, look for grounding and authority figures. Okay. So you're looking to be able to hold this power. And I'm curious, Robin, do you feel afraid of your power? Like when you feel the totality of your power, what happens when you feel the totality of your power? Like even now, when you feel into the totality of your power, does that feel ungrounded? Does it feel untethered? Does it feel unsafe? Like what happens when you feel in the totality? She, she said, I look for grounding and authority figures. I look for their approval or the response to my state. Okay, so essentially looking for someone to co-regulate that experience, right? Someone to say that it was okay. Someone to, if we think about, I'm looking for grounding and authority figures, I looked for their approval or their response to my state. Basically, what we can look at from a nervous system standpoint is someone to co-regulate the experience. I feel afraid of the bigness, unsafe because I'm so on display. It feels dangerous to be so seen. Right. So, right there in that sentence is the exact reason and what Robin is trying to work out within karmic relationships, within the hooks that she's experiencing. And so, what she said is, I feel afraid of the bigness. It's unsafe because I'm so on display. It feels dangerous to be so seen. Okay. So when she feels in the totality of her power, which happens in a wide open space, when she feels in the totality of her power, which happens in a wide open space, it doesn't feel safe, right? It doesn't feel safe. So now the way that we try to resolve that or try to extort a sense of control or safety is we find karmic relationships where we can hook in. Relationships that are predicated off us not being in our power. Relationships that are predicated off our smallness because our bigness is not safe. And so we find relationships where we can hook in, they can hook into us. Essentially, it becomes a neutralizing for feeling good. Also, what can happen is if, say, we're a woman who experiences this, if we didn't experience a safe container from the masculine, then that can feel really, really unsafe. If we didn't really experience when we were younger, being able to be in our bigness as you were like a young female, being in your bigness and then having that container or that frame being able to be held by some type of father figure, now that yeah, her father was absent. Makes a lot of sense. And so, right, so it's a father wound. But what happens is a feminine being in her total power, right? The association is that if I'm in my bigness, I won't be able to call in a masculine, or the masculine won't be interested in me, right? Because we didn't have that container when we were younger. We didn't have that safe place from the masculine. So as a young woman, as a young feminine being, if you didn't feel that sense of safety in the world for being who you were and being in the total bigness of who you were, then you're going to use karmic relationships as a way to kind of hook in, have people hook into you, you hook into other people so you don't have to experience that bigness that feels like a threat, right? Because you didn't have that frame, you didn't have that cultivation from the father or father figure when you were young. And so, Robin, how does this idea of um, moving into your power and being bigger than the masculine? I'm curious, how does it feel you moving into your power and you being bigger than the masculine? So if you were to imagine the masculine being really, really small and you being really, really big, I'm curious, how does that feel in your space when you imagine yourself being really, really big? I didn't feel approval for that bigness expansion as a child. No template for that in my body. Right. And so now we're just going to exist in these karmic relationships. So Robin, don't you think the pathway for you is that you need to feel everything that comes with that bigness, everything that comes with that wide open space, everything that comes with slowly and incrementally learning to feel more into your pleasure and more in your ecstasy in the wide open. Because here's the thing, and I talk about this a lot, you guys, in order to heal karmic relationships and step into your power relationally, you need to literally be able to feel yourself wide open in open space where you can't feel anyone but yourself. And what that means is when we move into that space where we can't feel anyone but ourselves, is that we're actually healing attachment trauma. What we're doing, so for example, if Robin were to feel into wide open space, feel into her pleasure, her ecstasy, her bigness in wide open space, what would be coming up is the attachment trauma with her father. Essentially, the karmic relationships are ways that she stays binded to the template of dad, right? We stay binded to the template of dad. So the karmic relationship keeps something in place. It's holding something in place, right? As a way that we felt we needed to do to survive. But what's happening now for her is she's realizing this doesn't work anymore, but yet the pattern's still prolonging. So do you guys connect to that? That what happens for a period of time when something karmic shifts, you become really sober to the pattern, yet you still continue to exist in the pattern. Does that resonate for you guys that are listening? When something is going to shift karmically, you become really sober to the pattern, yet you still continue to do it. There is an inflection point where you become really, really aware of a pattern that you know has to change, but for a period of time, you continue to exist in that pattern. So Robin says, I feel the path for me is to serve my expression of my full energetic size, to be dedicated to that. So the way for healing, yes, I can see it, but can't change it yet, but I know it's coming. So very simply put, what Robin's talking about, Robin was working through karma. So Robin needs to feel in her own energy without men. She needs to feel into her own energy without men, right? So what happens, and this is what so many people do, men and women, is we use relationships to survive and try to co-regulate our system. But what happens is we use them to co-regulate through inherited templates that are no longer working, right? So now what's happening, so Robin is trying to use the masculine to co-regulate her system, but she's so aware of what's happening, right? And what it's doing is it's creating stagnation with her power and what she's wanting to do, and it's creating stagnation with her relational choices and her satisfaction relation, right? And so the relationships we call in are going to be mirrors and reflections of what's happening internally. So Robin, she's got to feel into completely her own energy without any masculines in the space. And so typically what happens, you guys, is we're afraid of our power, right? We're afraid, and we have all these different ways that we try to neutralize feeling good. So, for example, say someone, right, like Robin's talking about, she co-regulates, uses men to co-regulate her nervous system from an inherited attachment template from her absent father, right? What that really means, simply put, is that feeling in her power doesn't feel safe, right? And so she's probably going to have a whole bunch of different convenient and unconscious ways that she neutralizes her pleasure, that she neutralizes feeling good. Because if she feels too good, it won't be safe and there won't be any men there. If we feel too good, it won't be safe and there will be no men that are there. No men that will be in that place, because from the perception of where we are, Robin, does that feel true? That if you move into your power, like no man would be able to meet you there, and that you can only find a man to meet you on account of diluting, diffusing, and severing your power. So now we have a store, we have a template that we inherit. And so her relational template is inherited from the attachment blueprint with her absent father. And so when she removes these cords and tethers and feels into her energy will drop. And everything that she felt in relationship to the absent father will come up. Everything that it felt like to move into your power and not be seen in that, to not have that be validated, to not be told that it's okay, to not be seen, to not be heard, everything comes up in that space. That's the gauntlet. That's the portal, right? So now, as you remove the cords and tethers, your energy can drop. And so all the attachment trauma with her father will come up. Yes, I do a caretaking with men. I'm in karmic relationship with that as grabby. It's trying to get closeness and establish codependency, right? So I love how honest you are, Robin, and just calling yourself out. But it's essentially what you're trying to do. And this is what we do. This is why it's survival. Karmic relationships, you're trying to create what you want without the risk. Does that make sense? You're trying to create what you want without the risk. You're trying to create what you want without the risk. This is what everyone does. Think about how many people fucking do this relationally. Everyone tries to create the relationships of their dreams without changing. Everyone tries to create the relationship of their dreams without fucking changing. Means like, I want to be comfortably on the shore. I don't want to be uncomfortable. I want to be comfortably on the shore. And I also want to cultivate and create this amazing relationship that has never existed before. Think about how many people fucking do that. It's so subtle. It might be a smile or an expression, such a tricky pattern. Yeah. But so often what we do is we try to cultivate something unprecedented. Again, very simply put, we try to create something brand new by the same patterns that have always existed, right? So something has to shift. Think about how many people feel entitled that we should have this incredible relationship, but we're not prepared to do what has to be done. And so, Robin, you need to go through a men cleanse. You need to go through a period of time where it's all about you and your own pleasure, and you're creating that framework and that blueprint and that roadmap for yourself. And now you can be aware of all the ways that your ego gets involved with men. And so essentially trying to create the relationship you want without the risk. But now you have to take the risk. In order to create the risk of what we want relationally, in order to create what we want relationally, we have to face the risk of being completely alone head on. That's the gauntlet. That's the passage. And so what that means is, as you heal some of your deepest attachment trauma, you're going to feel in the world all on your own. Like you feel all your own energy. You become your own hero, your own heroine. You feel your own energy totally on your own. And you run the risk of maybe I'm going to be all alone. And you face it head on. But most people try to create the sacred union comfortably from shore, and it doesn't work. That's usually where you continue to call in more karma, trauma bonding. And so if you continue to call in karmic relationships, It means that you are comfortably on shore trying to create something that requires you to venture out to sea in order to cultivate and create. So Robin's like, I can feel the shortcut of it. Trading closeness for intimacy. Intimacy has risk inherent. That's the surrender I need to practice. Yes, there's risk with intimacy, right? You have to take that leap. You have to take that leap. And again, it's karmic relationships are how we self-soothe. They're how we comfort, right? It's like a potato chip habit. It allows us to get a quick dopamine hit without sitting with ourselves, right? The same way that we use different things to self-medicate, to cope. Karmic relationships, if we have addictive patterns of karmic relationships, it's the same ways that we are using false illusions of intimacy to try to self-soothe us, to try to, comfort aspects of ourselves that we don't want to feel into, or we don't want to look at, or we don't want to alchemize. We don't want to feel into, right? And so we have to be able to sit with ourselves. And so again, a karmic relationship is a cord or a tether that you're using to survive and create a conditional exchange of intimacy, right? Living in a fantasy, living in some sort of, rather than fully facing the reality of yourself and fully dropping in. And so in Robin's case, what was doing, it was keeping a attachment imprint in place with her absent father. So by hooking into men and exchanging, as she said, closeness, choosing closeness over intimacy, which is choosing comfort over ecstasy, then she doesn't have to feel into the truth of that relationship with dad, with father, right? And so now that attachment imprint will continue to stay in place with her father, which is that if I move into my power, that no man will be there, no man will be able to meet me. She has to take that risk. As a woman, you have to take the risk that I'm going to be so in my power that no man will be able to meet me. The same thing, a man has to take that risk. I am so in my power that maybe no one will be able to meet me. But what happens in that risk, in that leap, is you move into a whole new paradigm of possibility. You move into a whole new paradigm of creation. You move into a whole new echelon of higher value men and women. Other men and women who have also similarly taken that leap. And now the people that you're going to be exposed to are going to have the same amount of personal responsibility and accountability over their shit, over their shadow as you do, as you've exemplified. You're going to find other people who have taken the risk in order to step into their power and face the prospect of being alone. You're never going to be able to be good at intimacy until you've inherently over and over taken the risk of being alone, choosing yourself over self-sacrifice, self-abandonment. People who have taken the risk of choosing themselves, and people who are willing to be alone on account that it means them choosing themselves. And so in doing that, you move into an upper echelon of men and women that are going to be in your field. And when you take that risk and when you really, really do it, what's going to happen is that all those karmic tethers are going to go away. People who are still enthralled in hooks are going to be repelled by your energy. They're going to be like, ooh, I can't hook into this person. And what it really, really means is you're living totally fucking congruently with spirit. You're living completely congruently with spirit. You know how when you're in a karmic relationship, it basically just has you continuing to live in your shadow. When you're in karmic relational cycles, it means you're continuing to live in your shadow. Right? It's important to do shadow work, but karmic relationships are shadow relationships. They're relationships predicated off you being stuck in your shadow. And they're coming up because it's asking you to take accountability and responsibility for these aspects of your shadow. Like Robin's being asked to look at the ways that her ego uses men, the ways that her ego uses men. And she just said that so she doesn't have to feel her power because it doesn't feel safe. Right? So she uses men to not have to feel into the full pleasure and ecstasy of who she is. And probably at some level, she's afraid of her power. And she's afraid of her power because of the association that her power has. She sees that if she's in her power, that she's not seen, she's not chosen, she's all alone. That's the imprint and connotation that being in her power has. And so now there's trauma and karma involved around being in her power. The trauma was that the father was absent. And the karma is that she continues to choose relationships that predicate off smallness and patterns of men hooking into her, and she hooks into men so that she continues to feel small. And the self-fulfilling prophecy is that my power is not safe. My bigness will repel men. That becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy that becomes exasperated and compounded by the choices that we make with men that she feels like maybe she has to mother, and she has men that she's trying to mold into their potential and their possibility. And what she's trying to do is she's trying to extort intimacy without the risk, trying to create intimacy without the risk of fully meeting all the unconscious and dormant aspects of herself that don't feel safe to access. And so as she moves into, and so from a practical sense, this looks like taking a detox from dating and men completely, feeling totally into your own energy and feeling everything that comes up in that, everything that comes up into that, and creating a new imprint and a new pathway that your pleasure, your ecstasy, your joy, your radiance, your power is safe, which is going to be incremental and it's going to take time, right? But we have ways that we try and neutralize that. So Robin's like, choosing comfort over ecstasy. Wow, yes. Think about, right? And again, right, this is where like love addiction comes into play, right? Where love addiction is basically you choose fleeting fits of infatuation, means fantasy predicated from unhealed wounds, that have you live in some reality of expectation without facing the reality of you and your life and what's really, really going on. And all of a sudden, nothing changes, nothing grows. The way that we experience ecstasy is reality. The way that we experience ecstasy is reality. We drop fully into ourselves, right? So comfort is fantasy, right? We're living compartmentalized, severed from the self. And so we live in imagination, we live in fantasy. We can never cultivate what we want. So ecstasy comes from reality. And so when we're choosing comfort, right, relationally, which is karma, you're choosing karma means you're trying to create intimacy without the risk. You're trying to create intimacy without the risk. And so you're choosing comfort. And so your relationships never feel like ecstasy, right? It always feels like some karmic recreation pattern. And so you have to take a detox from men, totally feel into yourself and create a new imprint that your power is safe, right? But think about how seldom people take that risk, right? That's why relationships are so fucking popular. Anyone who talks about relationships, their accounts soar because it's what everyone wants. But very few people are actually prepared to go on the personal individual journey that it takes to move into the paradigm where the person that you're looking for, that's going to be a divine creation, something new, something that your spirit truly wants, that is different than where you come from. The work that's needed to get there, very few are willing to walk the path and willing to take the risk necessary to get that potential reward. And it requires you to face what you fear. It requires you to face what you fear. And so Robin knows what to do. She knows what to do. But it's a question of when, or are we going to do it? Are we going to do what is necessary, right? And so that's why karmic relationships are placeholders for your power. Karmic relationships are cords that you hold into place because you're afraid of your power. And you might be afraid of it for different reasons. But a karmic relationship, cords coming into you and you hooking cords on other people, these are ways that you're trying to survive with old identities so you don't have to face your power because you're afraid of it. You're afraid of where this might lead you, of what this might create, of what this might cultivate. And so in that risk, that's where you begin to walk the path of sacred union. That's where you walk the path of you're going to find someone else who has also taken that journey. Someone who won't hook into you. someone who can live as the embodiment of love, someone who can live as this higher value of creation, someone who can live with this level of responsibility and accountability by how they choose to show up and what they take account for in their body and their vessel, and the responsibility they have over their energy and their vessel and their contribution to cleaning up their side of the fence and taking responsibility for, I do this and I need to take responsibility so that I can serve the feminine. I need to take responsibility so I can serve the masculine. Right? And so when you do this, you are finally being of service, right? You're being of service to the other pole, right? So as men and women, we have so many ways that we use men, that we use women, we use the feminine, we use the masculine, and we exist in conditional exchanges of closeness, foregoing the intimacy that we desire. And so to be of true service to the other pole, for a man to be of true service to the feminine, he has to learn to live as the total congruence of spirit for his fucking mission and what he's here to do in the world, and the penetration that he is meant to emit into the world, and the wounded aspects of his little boy that he takes responsibility and accountability for and continues to work towards healing so that he can move into a new creative vibration, so that he can truly serve the feminine in the way that she deserves and desires. The same thing for women relating to men and the masculine. We need to move into an energy of being of service rather than conditional exchanges of using and abusing. So, Robin, you know what to do there. You just got to take that leap. And you got to cut it off. You got to cut it off and allow your energy to drop. And when you cut those cords, what happens is you will experience like equal parts, the discomfort, the difficulty, the difficult emotions, but equal parts like the fucking liberation. And you'll feel more in general. And it will feel equal parts like a death and birth happening simultaneously. But the cords and the karmic ties are the ways that we're avoiding having to feel the totality that we're capable of feeling. How we're choosing comfort over our ecstasy. And so the energy drops. And in that we can move into our total power. And you see most of these people talking about sacred union, but again, they're trying to create a sacred union from one side of the shore rather than the rite of passage and the initiation that is required as an individual to even get into that paradigm where that unprecedented creation relationship can even come into view and come into your space. And it requires the accountability and responsibility for the path that you must walk to clean up your fucking vibration, right? When you clean up your fucking vibration and your frequency is totally infused with source, karma fucking goes. No one trying to hook into you has any power over you, and they don't come into your space. They fucking evaporate. And you move into a whole new space of creation and possibility. So when you unhook these cords, your energy becomes so clean. It becomes holy. It becomes totally infused with source. And that's the exchange where you move into the relationship that will have everything, but you have to take that risk. And you have to walk that path, right? It's the old adage that like everything great, it takes a lot of hard work. You have to earn it. It doesn't just fucking come. You have to walk the path. You have to be in full integrity of the journey that it takes to get there. And most people are so addicted to relational content and relationships that we're searching through urgency and scarcity that we never actually go through the risk or the journey. And that's why most people create similar depths of intimacy from the imprints they come from, why people create so many karmic relationships or unsatisfied relationships with terrible polarity, relationships where you're not lit the fuck up and inspired, because we don't take that risk. We don't walk that path. So I'm going to leave it there for today's live on trauma, karma, and relationships. Thank you so much, Robin, for your contribution in the chat, for your willingness to respond and engage and take ownership for what's going on in your space. And I know Robin as well, and I know she knows what to do. I think it's just a question of when. um, just a question of when. But hopefully, this brought even more clarity and reinforced more clarity, and potentially even brought a little bit more courage in the execution of what needs to be done. Um, Again, you guys, if you resonate with this, please like this video. If you haven't already, please subscribe to my channel. Again, I have a couple new pieces of content that have dropped this week. The amount of content I'm dropping is going to continue to increase. It's going to be lots more content, as well as these lives every Friday. I have many more new things dropping the next 3 months. There's going to be a lot of new things arriving in my space, which I'll continue to talk about. So keep an eye and an ear out for new things I'm dropping, different offerings, different community spaces, etc. But yeah, and if you feel someone might resonate with this, someone else, pass it along, send it to a friend, someone who's going through karmic relationships, having trouble releasing, and stepping forward into their power. And yeah, thanks so much, everyone, for who watched and listened here. And hope everyone has a great weekend. And we'll see you next week in next Friday's live. Much appreciated, everybody. Hope everyone has a wonderful weekend ahead.